Thank you to IPDLN for allowing us to present on the topic of smart cities. Our presentation is entitled Balancing Opportunities and Risks Related to Privacy and Innovation. My name is Rosati Cartagena and I'm the Chief Privacy and Legal Officer at ICES. And also speaking today is Emily Scrivens, who is the Privacy Analyst at ICES. Emily will begin first by providing an overview of the Smart Cities Initiative, and then I will go into a bit more detail and provide more information on the findings of our report. Over to you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. As part of the Smart Cities Governance Initiative by Compute Ontario and Orion, under a grant from the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, ICES was asked to provide insights and explore the creation of a health data trust model. This excerpt from the Building Ontario's Next Generation Smart Cities Through Data Governance report gives a strong summary of the Smart Cities Initiative. There are many definitions of a smart city, but central to all of them is the implementation of advanced technology for the creation of systems and services to support prosperity and quality of life for people. As cities adopt smart infrastructure, they are beginning to gather useful data. Alone, that data can provide useful insights to help make specific aspects of city life more efficient and more livable. Combined with other data, city data could generate innovative and new uses and new value. This emerging opportunity raises important questions for how data might be owned, shared, and governed. ICS was tasked with exploring the creation of a data trust for improved access to health data, as we are an established health data repository. ICS is a nonprofit research and analytic institute with networks of 7 sites across Ontario within academic research centers and universities, all of which support high-quality health data research. ICS has been designated as a prescribed entity under the Ontario Health Information Legislation. As a PE, ICS is in a unique and privileged position to be able to collect individual level data without consent from a variety of health stakeholders and a limited number of non-health stakeholders. Over the years, we have been able to amass billions of data points of health data related to Ontarians. All of this brings us to the question, could ICS be the data trust? Well, it depends. ICS is already a nonprofit with the mission to translate data into strong research, and our goal is for the betterment of healthcare for all Ontarians. Though ICS works with government, it is not government and operates as an independent arm's-length research and analytic institute. Being independent of government gives us the opportunity to be trusted and bipartisan. ICS currently has the legislative authority as a prescribed entity under Ontario privacy laws to collect PHI without consent. ICS is heavily regulated by the Information and Privacy Commissioner, meaning there is strong accountability structure and transparency in our operations. However, there are some cons. ICS can't be a legal trust, as there are obstacles in having individual researchers who access and use the data, or the patients whose health will be improved by the research as beneficiaries of the trust. But this is not so bad, because, as described in the report, our finding is that a trust has no standing under Ontario's current public sector and health sector privacy laws to receive and collect personal health information, and is in no better position than ICS to allow broader access to data. A second con is that presently the legislative instruments do not allow for the linking of health with non-health data to support a smart cities model efficiently, and therefore legislative and regulatory amendments are required. I'll now turn it over to Rosario for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Emily. So, as we just presented, there are regulatory challenges when it comes to ICS being a health data trust. But what we would propose is that in addition to there being regulatory amendments to assist us to become a health data trust for smart cities, if that is the political will, that there also be a consideration of a data governance and protection framework to also be in place. The driver for a data governance and protection framework is really the notion of social acceptance. So you can see in this pyramid that socially the public's will in supporting a model of a health data trust could in fact be, it's not just about acceptance, but it's also about approval, and even more so, it's about psychological identification with the idea. And for that to happen, there needs to be trust. And so trust being the foundation of a health data and protection framework is crucial if ICS is to be a health data trust. And there are 7 basic principles for building such a data governance and protection framework overall. And we will present to you the very first principle on the next slide, and that being of data privacy. So it's no surprise that data privacy is becoming more challenged as the notion of big data arises. And that is because it's in tension with many of the traditional data protection principles that exist with respect to collection limitation, purpose specification, use, data minimization, retention, transparency, as well as an individual being able to access and correct their own information. But the notion of data privacy is fundamental to building a health data trust, and it's an evolving concept, which is a take-home message, and we have to balance the risk by continuing to stay informed and utilizing data privacy in any framework that we create. The second principle is that of data security. So it's no surprise that the number of breaches around the world are continuing to grow. The cost of maintaining that data breach is also continuing to grow. But as soon as a data breach occurs, the social acceptance pyramid that we presented on the very first slide, in other words, the social license to continue collecting and using the data and being classified as a health data trust is broken, and trust and credibility are hard to gain back, as we've explained. So data security has to be fundamental to any type of framework. The next slide and the next principle includes the notion of data education. And what we mean by that is that individuals whose data is being utilized, so both the actors who are using the data and those whose data is being utilized, have to be educated about the data itself. And so that's the notion about digital literacy. And so how people understand the data they work or share, including how they're aware of any positive or negative impacts of the data use and sharing. The take-home message overall is that there is such a huge, immense cultural shift happening. And so we have to be prepared to answer questions, and any health data trust has to be prepared to answer questions in this regard. The fourth principle is the notion of data, personal data empowerment. And so this really means, is the health data trust one of a basis of a basic data steward, or is it more on the notion of data rights? What rights does the health data trust have? And can an individual have any control over their own data? Can they see what data the health data trust has? And so, whether an individual owns the data that relates to them is a question, but they do certainly maintain a stake in that data. So a health data trust has to take this question into consideration. The take-home message is that finding ways to respect this interest while using the data is central, and it gives legitimacy to the operation. The fifth principle that needs to be taken into consideration for the building of a health data trust is the notion of data justice. And so what we mean by that is that there must be ethical training for AI practitioners and students, ideally every student learning AI, to avoid predictive policy making that would reflect the biases and mindsets of the creators, even if those biases are not intended. So ensuring that data that is being used is not there to replicate social inequities, and ensuring that vulnerable and marginalized people can access the data as well. The take-home message, of course, is that vulnerable communities are disproportionately susceptible to big data discrimination. And so if we are to create a health data trust, we need to ensure that due care is taken in this regard. The sixth principle is the notion of data sovereignty. And so this is a matter of being transparent and having a very clear policy as to whether data is going to be leaving the country or whether it's going to reside in the country. Decisions by any corporation or any health data trust regarding the flows of data and how that may impact social acceptance is central as well to the notion of a health data trust and that social acceptance model pyramid in terms of ensuring that you move past acceptance to really psychological embrace of the concept of a health data trust. The seventh principle and the last principle is the question of oversight. So there must be oversight of any health data trust, whether it's through the privacy regulators we have, maybe also the notion of not just research ethics board, because that's for research projects, but other types of use of the data as well. What about data security as a whole to ensure that there is a mature security posture in the health data trust? Overall, the take-home message for any health data trust is that there will be oversight, and so the Health Data Trust has to be prepared and ready. So the last slide really is a summary of our presentation, is really to say, is the Health Data Trust model viable? So we've come to the conclusion that it is viable if there's the right balance, if the public accepts the social goals set out in that social acceptance pyramid. In the case of ICES, we're a profit and is for the public good. Secondly, if there's political will, and that really comes down to whether there's a political will to move forward on regulatory amendments to create a health data trust for the Smart Cities initiative or for any type of initiative related to the government and policy planning. And of course, that there continues to be a clear vision for ensuring that there is a strong data governance and protection framework to ensure that the entity who's hosting the data trust is ultimately accountable to the people of Ontario. In the case of ICES. So this means continuing to be transparent about any gains from the economic potential of data, respecting fundamental privacy, ensuring that there is strong cybersecurity posture in all processes and in use of the data, ensuring that the public is educated about how their data is being utilized, incorporating an ethical lens as well in different projects that use the data. Building governance processes that continue to maintain our national identity and being transparent about those. And then lastly, continuing to respect the oversight of regulators whose role is to protect the public's interest. So in conclusion, the data trust model is viable, but in order to ensure that it exists in a way that we can have a strong data protection and governance framework is really key, and in combination with regulatory amendments that exist. For more information, please see a report. Feel free to read and email us with any questions. Lastly, other team members on this project are set out in the slide. Charles Victor, Senior Director, Strategic Partnerships and Digital Services at ICES, Kelly Ross, Director of Privacy and Legal, Michael Schul, our CEO. And acknowledgement, we'd like to thank Compute Ontario and Orion for guiding this work as part of the Smart Cities Governance Report supported by the Government of Ontario. Lastly, our information is on the last slide. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about our presentation. Thank you very much.